The fine notice taped to my front door was bright orange, impossible to miss, and absolutely ridiculous $250 for unsightly yard conditions and environmental hazards, which according to the attached photo was just some yellow snow near my mailbox. I stood there on my porch in the freezing February morning, coffee in hand, staring at this piece of paper like it might suddenly make sense if I squinted hard enough. The photo showed maybe a 3-foot patch of discolored snow on the corner of my property, the kind of thing you'd see in any suburban neighborhood in Boulder, Colorado during winter. But apparently, our homeowners association had decided this was worth a fine that could cover a week's worth of groceries. I'm Connor Radcliffe, and I'd been living in the Meadowbrook Estates development for about 2 years. It was a decent enough place, close to my job as a software developer for a tech startup downtown, and the houses were well maintained. The problem was the HOA, specifically one woman who seemed to have made it her personal mission to make everyone's life miserable. Her name was Patricia Henderson, though everyone called her Patty behind her back. She was exactly what you'd picture when someone says, HOA nightmare, mid-50s. Highlighted blonde hair always styled like she was heading to a country club, designer athleisure outfits, and an expression that suggested she'd just smelled something unpleasant. She drove a white Mercedes SUV with a custom license plate that read Hoken, which I assumed meant HOA Queen. Subtle. I pulled the notice off my door and went back inside, already pulling up my phone to call the HOA office. The number rang 4 times before someone picked up. Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. This is Denise speaking. Denise was all right. She was the actual office manager, a woman in her 30s who clearly just needed the job and tried to stay out of Patricia's warpath as much as possible. Hey Denise, it's Connor Radcliffe from 428 Pinewood Drive. I just found a fine notice on my door about yellow snow. There was a pause, then a sigh. Oh, Connor, yeah, I saw that one come through yesterday. Patricia did a neighborhood inspection. A neighborhood inspection. In the middle of winter. For snow. I know. Look, between you and me, I think it's a bit much, but she's the HOA president, and technically the bylaws do say residents are responsible for maintaining their properties free of unsightly conditions. It's snow, Denise. Yellow snow, sure, but it's February. Snow gets dirty. Rain will wash it away in a few days. Have you considered what might have caused it? She noted it looked like animal waste contamination. I rubbed my temples. I don't have a dog or any pets. That's what I thought. Maybe a neighborhood dog. And that's when it hit me. Patricia Henderson had a dog. A small, yappy Pomeranian named Princess that she walked around the neighborhood twice a day, always without a leash despite the leash laws, and that dog peed on everything. I'd seen it pee on my mailbox post at least a dozen times. You know what, Denise? I think I know exactly whose dog made that yellow snow. There was another pause. Connor, whatever you're thinking, Patricia walks her dog past my house every day. I've seen Princess pee on my mailbox post before, multiple times. I really can't get involved in disputes between residents and board members. I'm not asking you to get involved. I'm telling you I'm going to appeal this fine, and I'm going to present evidence that the HOA president's own dog caused the issue she's fining me for. You're really going to do this? $250, Denise. You're damn right I'm going to do this. After I hung up, I spent the next hour doing what any reasonable person in 2025 would do. I checked my security cameras. I'd installed a Ring doorbell and a couple of outdoor cameras after someone had stolen packages from my porch the previous year. The cameras covered my front yard pretty well, including the area near the mailbox where the yellow snow incident had occurred. I pulled up the footage from the past week and started scanning through. Boulder had gotten a fresh snow dump about 5 days ago on a Sunday evening. The snow had been pristine white Monday morning. I fast-forwarded through Monday's footage, watching the occasional car drive by, a delivery truck, some kids walking to the bus stop. Then, at 7:23 a.m. on Monday morning, there she was. Patricia Henderson, in her purple puffy jacket and white yoga pants, walking past my house. And there was Princess, the cream-colored Pomeranian, trotting along beside her without a leash. I watched as the dog veered toward my mailbox, sniffed around the base, and then Bingo squatted and peed right in the spot that was now the subject of a $250 fine. I saved the video clip and watched it 3 more times to make sure it was clear. The timestamp was visible, the dog was clearly identifiable, and Patricia was right there watching her dog do it. Perfect. But I didn't stop there. I went back through the previous month's footage and found 6 more instances of Princess peeing in my yard, 6 times in January alone. I saved all of those clips too. The HOA bylaws stated that any fine could be appealed within 10 days by submitting a written appeal and any supporting evidence. Appeals would be reviewed at the next monthly board meeting, which according to the community calendar on the HOA website was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening. I spent that afternoon crafting my appeal. I kept it professional but pointed. I explained that I did not own any pets, that I had video evidence of the HOA president's dog repeatedly urinating on my property without the owner cleaning up or preventing it, and that I believed it was unreasonable to fine a homeowner for conditions caused by another resident's pet, particularly when that resident was the president of the HOA board. I attached stills from the videos showing Patricia and Princess, with timestamps clearly visible, and included a link to a cloud storage folder with all the video clips. I also included a screenshot of the Boulder County Leash Law Ordinance, which required dogs to be on a leash when off their owner's property. I submitted the appeal through the HOA's online portal and sent a copy via certified mail to the HOA's registered address, just to cover all my bases. 2 days later, my phone rang. Unknown number, Boulder area code. I answered. "Is this Connor Radcliffe?" The voice was sharp, offended, and I recognized it immediately. "This is Connor. This is Patricia Henderson, president of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA board. I received your appeal regarding the fine for the unsightly conditions at your property." "Good. Then you saw the evidence." "I saw your video clips, yes. I have to say, I'm disappointed that you would try to blame an innocent pet for your own lack of yard maintenance." I actually laughed. "My lack of yard maintenance? Patricia, your dog peed in my yard, multiple times. It's all on video. Princess is a very well-behaved dog. If she happened to relieve herself near your property, that's nature. Dogs need to go to the bathroom on walks. Then you're responsible for cleaning it up. And according to Boulder County ordinance, your dog should be on a leash. I hardly think you're in a position to lecture me about county ordinances, Mr. Radcliffe. Princess is a small dog, very gentle, and she's always under my control." "That's not what the law says. The law says leash." There was a cold pause. "Your appeal will be reviewed by the board at the next meeting. I should warn you, though, that frivolous appeals and attempts to blame board members for violations can result in additional fines for disrupting HOA proceedings." "Is that a threat?" "It's a statement of fact. The bylaws are very clear. I suggest you review Article 7, Section 3. She hung up. I immediately pulled up the HOA bylaws on my computer. Article 7, Section 3 did indeed state that residents who submitted frivolous appeals or made false accusations against board members could be fined up to $500. But the key word was frivolous and false. My appeal was neither. I had video evidence. Still, Patricia's tone had worried me. She was clearly not going to back down, and as HOA president, she had a lot of control over the board. I needed to know who else was on the board and whether any of them might actually be reasonable. The HOA website listed the board members. Besides Patricia as president, there was Gordon Tate as vice president, a retired accountant who lived 3 streets over. The secretary was Michelle Young, a real estate agent who'd sold me my house, actually. She'd seemed nice enough. The treasurer was Bob Kowalski, who I'd met once at a neighborhood barbecue. And there was one at-large member, Susan Chen, who taught at the University of Colorado. I decided to reach out to Michelle first, since we'd had a positive interaction before. I found her work email on her real estate website and sent her a message. "Hi, Michelle. This is Connor Radcliffe. You sold me my house at 428 Pinewood a couple years ago. I wanted to give you a heads up that I've submitted an appeal for a fine I received, and it's going to be discussed at the next board meeting. I have video evidence that supports my case, but I got a strange call from Patricia that made me a little concerned about how this might be handled. Any advice? Thanks, Connor." She responded within an hour. "Connor, I remember you. Congratulations on making it 2 years in Meadowbrook, lol. Look, I'll be honest with you, Patricia can be difficult. She takes the HOA rules very seriously, but the board does look at evidence fairly. If you have video proof of what you're claiming, present it clearly at the meeting. You're allowed to attend and speak during the appeals portion. I can't discuss the specifics of your case with you before the meeting, but I can tell you that all board members get to vote on appeals, not just Patricia. Hope that helps, Michelle." That did help, actually. If the vote was by all board members, then Patricia couldn't just unilaterally deny my appeal. I'd have a chance to present my case to the full board. The next Tuesday evening, I arrived at the Meadowbrook Estates clubhouse at 6:45 p.m. for the 7:00 p.m. board meeting. The clubhouse was a modest building near the front of the development, with a meeting room, a small gym, and a pool that was covered for winter. Several other residents were already there, sitting in the folding chairs that had been set up facing a long table where the board members would sit. I recognized a few faces from around the neighborhood, but didn't know most of them personally. Patricia arrived at 6:55, and of course, she had Princess with her. The little dog trotted along beside her, still without a leash, as Patricia made her way to the center seat at the board table. "Excuse me," I said, standing up. "Are dogs allowed at board meetings?" Patricia looked at me with cold eyes. "Princess is an emotional support animal. I have documentation. The ADR requires that emotional support animals be under control. Doesn't that mean a leash?" "Princess is perfectly under control, Mr. Radcliffe. Please take your seat. The meeting is about to begin." Gordon, Michelle, Bob, and Susan filed in and took their seats. Gordon was a heavy-set man in his 60s with thick glasses. Bob was probably mid-50s, wearing a Denver Broncos sweatshirt. Susan was younger, maybe early 40s, with her hair pulled back in a ponytail. Patricia called the meeting to order, and they went through the usual business, approving the minutes from last month, treasurer's report, discussion about when to open the pool for the summer season. I tried to be patient, but I was anxious to get to the appeals portion of the meeting. Finally, after about 45 minutes, Patricia said, "We'll now move to homeowner appeals. We have one appeal this month from Connor Radcliffe regarding a fine issued for unsightly yard conditions. Mr. Radcliffe, you have 5 minutes to present your case. I stood up and walked to the front of the room, pulling up the video clips on my laptop. I'd brought a cable to connect to the projector screen that was set up in the room. Thank you. As you all know, I received a fine for yellow snow in my yard near my mailbox. The fine notice indicated this was due to unsightly conditions and possible animal waste contamination. I don't own any pets, so I reviewed my security camera footage to determine the source of the issue. I played the first video clip, the one from Monday morning showing Patricia walking Princess and the dog peeing in my yard. This footage is from February 3rd, the day after our last snowstorm, which deposited fresh snow Sunday evening. As you can see, at 7:23 a.m., a dog urinates on my property near my mailbox. This is Princess, owned by Patricia Henderson, our HOA president. The dog is off-leash, which violates Boulder County ordinance. I could see Patricia's face turning red, but she stayed quiet. This isn't an isolated incident. I played several more clips, each showing similar behavior on different dates. I have documented 6 additional instances in January alone of this dog urinating on my property. I believe it's unreasonable to fine me for conditions caused by another resident's pet, especially when that resident is the HOA president who issued the fine. I disconnected my laptop and returned to my seat. Patricia cleared her throat. Thank you, Mr. Radcliffe. I'd like to respond to these accusations. Patricia, I'm not sure that's appropriate, Michelle said. You're the subject of the complaint. Maybe Gordon should run this portion of the meeting. I am perfectly capable of remaining objective, Patricia snapped. Mr. Radcliffe has presented videos that show my dog relieving herself during our morning walks. This is normal dog behavior. The issue is not whether a dog urinated in his yard. Dogs urinate. That's what they do. The issue is that Mr. Radcliffe failed to clean his yard, allowing the snow to remain yellow and unsightly for days. Any responsible homeowner would have simply shoveled away the affected snow. I stood back up. I'm sorry, but that's absurd. It snowed Sunday night. The incident occurred Monday morning, and I received the fine Tuesday afternoon. Less than 36 hours passed. In what universe is a homeowner responsible for immediately cleaning up after someone else's pet on their own property? The bylaws state that properties must be kept free of unsightly conditions, Patricia said. Yellow snow is unsightly. Bob, the treasurer, spoke up. Pat, I have to say, this seems like a reach. If your dog caused the problem, I'm not sure how we can fairly fine Connor for it. The fine is for allowing the condition to persist, Patricia insisted. Susan, the at-large member, raised her hand. Can I ask a question? Patricia, when you issued this fine, did you know it was your dog that had caused it? I did not review the source of every unsightly condition I observed during property inspections. My job is to enforce the bylaws. But you walk past Connor's house every morning, Susan continued. You must have known Princess had been in that area. I can't be expected to monitor every single spot where my dog relieves herself during walks. We walk 2 miles every morning. Michelle leaned forward. I think the real question is whether it's fair to fine a homeowner for something they didn't cause and couldn't reasonably prevent. Connor doesn't own a dog. He has no control over whether other people's dogs urinate in his yard. If we uphold this fine, we're essentially saying every homeowner is responsible for cleaning up after every dog that passes by their property, immediately, regardless of weather conditions. That's exactly what I'm saying, Patricia said. Homeowners are responsible for the appearance of their properties. It's in the bylaws. Gordon adjusted his glasses. I think we should vote. We have a motion to appeal the fine. all in favor of upholding the appeal and canceling the fine. Michelle raised her hand immediately. Susan raised hers a second later. Bob looked uncomfortable but raised his hand as well. Opposed, Patricia raised her hand. Gordon hesitated, then kept his hand down. The appeal is upheld 3-1 with one abstention. The fine is canceled. I felt relief wash over me, but I could see Patricia's expression darkening. I want it noted in the minutes that I strongly oppose this decision, Patricia said. This sets a terrible precedent for property maintenance. Noted, Gordon said quietly. As people started to leave, Patricia called out, "Mr. Radcliffe, a word." I walked over to the board table where she was packing up her things. Princess sat at her feet, looking up at me with what I swear was hostility. "You've made an enemy today," Patricia said quietly. "I just didn't want to pay a fine for something I didn't do. You humiliated me in front of the board and other homeowners. You presented evidence that made me look irresponsible and hypocritical. That was your goal, wasn't it?" "My goal was to not pay $250 for your dog's pee. This neighborhood has rules, Mr. Radcliffe. Rules that I work very hard to enforce so that property values remain high and the community stays pleasant. People like you, who think the rules don't apply to them, who fight every little thing, you make my job harder. People like me. I followed the rules. I submitted an appeal with evidence. The board voted in my favor. That's how the process is supposed to work." She leaned closer, her voice dropping even lower. "Watch yourself. I'll be paying very close attention to your property from now on. Any violation, no matter how small, and you'll receive a fine, and I'll make sure it sticks." She picked up Princess and walked out. Michelle approached me as I was gathering my things. "Hey, Connor, be careful, okay? Patricia doesn't let things go. She once spent 6 months building a case against a resident who painted their front door the wrong shade of approved colors. She eventually forced them to repaint. I didn't do anything wrong. I know. I'm just saying, watch your back. Document everything. Keep your property absolutely perfect for a while." Over the next few weeks, I did exactly that. I made sure my trash cans were never visible from the street outside of pickup days. I kept my driveway clear of any ice or snow. I even paid a landscaping company to come out and do a thorough winter yard cleanup, removing dead branches and debris. But Patricia was true to her word. In mid-March, I received another fine. This one was for unauthorized exterior modification. Apparently, my doormat was not an approved color. According to the bylaws, doormats had to be in earth tones or neutral colors. Mine was navy blue. I photographed the doormat, checked the bylaws, and confirmed that navy blue could reasonably be considered a neutral color. I submitted another appeal, with photos of 3 other houses in the neighborhood that had similarly colored doormats. At the next board meeting, my appeal was upheld again, 4-1, with only Patricia voting against it. 2 weeks later, another fine arrived. This one claimed my mailbox flag was faded and needed repainting. I went out and looked at my mailbox flag. It looked fine to me, but I took photos from multiple angles and compared them to other mailboxes in the neighborhood. Several were clearly more faded than mine. I appealed again. This time at the board meeting, Gordon spoke up before the vote. "Patricia, this is getting ridiculous. You're clearly targeting Connor. This is the 3rd fine in 2 months. I'm enforcing the bylaws equally across all properties," Patricia said. "Really? Because I did a drive around the neighborhood today, and I found 11 mailboxes with more faded flags than Connor's." "Did any of them receive fines?" Patricia's jaw tightened. "I haven't completed inspections of every street yet." "This is harassment," Michelle said. "We all know what this is about. Connor won his appeal about the yellow snow, and you've been targeting him ever since." I am doing my job as HOA president. Susan spoke up. Patricia, I think you need to step back from any enforcement actions regarding Connor's property. This creates a clear conflict of interest. You have a personal issue with him. I do not have a personal issue. I have a professional concern about a homeowner who continuously violates our bylaws. He hasn't violated anything, Bob said. We've upheld every single appeal. You're wasting the board's time and the HOA's resources. The vote to uphold my mailbox flag appeal was unanimous, with Patricia abstaining. After the meeting, Michelle pulled me aside again. This isn't going to stop. You know that, right? What am I supposed to do? Sell my house? You could file a harassment complaint. The bylaws have provisions for dealing with board members who abuse their authority. I hadn't considered that option. How does that work? You'd need to submit a formal complaint to the board with documentation of the harassment. If the board agrees there's a pattern of abuse, they can vote to remove a board member. It requires a 2/3 vote. You think the others would vote to remove her? Maybe. But it would get ugly. Patricia has friends in the neighborhood. People who think she's doing a great job keeping property values high. I thought about it that night. Did I really want to escalate this into a full-blown war with the HOA president? On the other hand, what choice did I have? She'd explicitly told me she was going to target my property, and she'd been doing exactly that for 2 months. The next morning, I started documenting everything. I created a spreadsheet with dates, types of fines, the appeals process, and the outcomes. I included notes about Patricia's threat after the first board meeting and Michelle's warnings about Patricia's behavior. Then, I did something else. I started taking daily photos of my property from multiple angles: front yard, backyard, sides, mailbox, door, everything. I wanted a record showing that my property was well maintained and in compliance with all bylaws. I also started documenting other properties in the neighborhood. I took photos of actual violations: faded paint, overgrown bushes, trash cans left out, cars parked on lawns. I noted the addresses and dates. I wanted to show that Patricia was enforcing rules selectively. In late April, just as spring was properly arriving in Boulder, I received my 4th fine. This one claimed that I had planted flowers in my front yard without prior approval from the Architectural Review Committee. The flowers in question were tulips. They'd been there when I bought the house 2 years ago. They came up every spring from bulbs that were already in the ground. I pulled out the listing photos from when I'd purchased the house. Sure enough, there were tulips visible in those photos too. I included all of this in my appeal, along with a note pointing out that the tulips were pre-existing and that the bylaws only required approval for new landscaping installations. But before the next board meeting, I also filed a formal harassment complaint against Patricia. I attached my spreadsheet, copies of all the fines and appeals, photos showing my property was well maintained, and photos showing other properties with actual violations that hadn't been fined. The day after I filed the complaint, my phone started ringing. First it was Gordon, asking if I was sure I wanted to pursue this. Then Michelle, expressing support but concern. Then Bob, staying neutral but acknowledging the situation was problematic. The only board member I didn't hear from was Patricia, which somehow worried me more than if she'd called to yell at me. The May board meeting was packed. Word had gotten around the neighborhood about the harassment complaint, and it seemed like everyone wanted to see what would happen. The meeting room was standing room only. Patricia called the meeting to order, but Gordon immediately interrupted. Before we proceed with regular business, we need to address the formal complaint that's been filed. Given that Patricia is the subject of the complaint, I'm going to chair this portion of the meeting. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue but sat back in her chair, crossing her arms. Gordon laid out the situation. Connor Radcliffe has filed a harassment complaint against Patricia Henderson, alleging abuse of authority and selective enforcement of bylaws. Per our bylaws, the board must review the complaint and vote on whether the allegations have merit. If we find merit, we'll proceed to a vote on sanctions, which could include removal from the board. Connor, would you like to present your case? I stood up and walked through everything: the initial yellow snow incident caused by Patricia's own dog, her explicit threat afterward, the series of questionable fines over the following months, the fact that every fine had been appealed successfully, and the evidence of other violations in the neighborhood that weren't being enforced. I'm not trying to be difficult, I concluded. I just want to live in my house in peace without being constantly harassed by the HOA president because I proved her dog caused a problem she tried to fine me for. Patricia was given a chance to respond. Mr. Radcliffe is trying to paint himself as a victim, but the reality is that he has consistently tested the boundaries of our bylaws. Yes, his appeals have been upheld, but that doesn't mean the initial concerns weren't valid. As for selective enforcement, I have been systematically working through the neighborhood conducting inspections. I can't inspect every property simultaneously. Mr. Radcliffe's property has received more attention because it has had more issues. That's not true, I said. I have photos dated from the past 2 months showing violations at multiple properties that haven't received any fines at all. I pulled up my laptop again and displayed the photos on the projector. There was a house with an actual dead tree in the front yard. Another with trash cans that had been left on the curb for a full week. A third with a fence that was clearly leaning and damaged. Have any of these properties received fines? I asked. Patricia was silent for a moment. As I said, I'm working through the neighborhood systematically. These photos are from April and May. I received 4 fines in March and April alone, all of which were overturned. Meanwhile, these actual violations have gone unaddressed. Gordon looked uncomfortable. Patricia, can you explain the discrepancy? I prioritize based on visibility and impact on property values. Mr. Radcliffe's property is in a highly visible location near the main entrance to the development. Actually, my house is pretty far back in the neighborhood, I said. 2 of the properties I just showed are closer to the entrance. Michelle spoke up. I think we need to vote on whether the harassment complaint has merit. I've reviewed all the documentation Connor provided, and I've also looked at the history of fines issued in the past year. Patricia has issued 32 fines in the past year. Connor has received 4 of them in the past 3 months. Before that, he'd never received a fine. The pattern is pretty clear. Susan nodded. I agree. I think there's merit to the complaint. The question is what we do about it. This is outrageous, Patricia said, standing up. I have devoted countless hours to this community. I've worked hard to maintain our property values and enforce our standards, and this is the thanks I get, being accused of harassment because I actually care about the rules. It's not about caring about the rules, Bob said. It's about applying them fairly, and the evidence suggests you haven't been doing that with Connor. Gordon called for a vote on whether the harassment complaint had merit. Michelle, Susan, and Bob voted yes. Gordon voted yes as well. Patricia, of course, voted no. The complaint is found to have merit 4-1, Gordon said. Now we need to discuss sanctions. The bylaws allow for several options, including a formal warning, temporary suspension from the board, or removal from the board. Removal requires a 2/3 vote. I'd like to propose a compromise, Michelle said. What if we issue a formal warning and require that Patricia recuse herself from any enforcement actions or appeals involving Connor's property for the next year? That addresses the conflict of interest without removing her from the board entirely. Gordon looked around the table. Does that seem reasonable to everyone? Bob and Susan nodded. Patricia looked furious but said nothing. Patricia, do you agree to these terms? Gordon asked. Do I have a choice? You can accept the compromise, or we can proceed to a vote on your removal from the board. She was silent for a long moment. Fine. I'll recuse myself from matters involving Mr. Radcliffe's property. That needs to be a formal motion and vote, Michelle said. They went through the formality of the motion and vote. It passed 5-0, with even Patricia voting in favor rather than abstaining, probably to save face. As people filed out after the meeting, several neighbors came up to me. Some thanked me for standing up to Patricia. Others seemed uncomfortable, probably friends of hers who thought I'd caused unnecessary drama. One older gentleman, probably in his 70s, shook my hand. Good for you, son. Patricia's had this neighborhood under her thumb for 5 years. It's about time someone called her out. But a middle-aged woman in expensive-looking jogging clothes gave me a cold look. You do realize property values depend on strict enforcement of standards, don't you? People like you who fight every rule make things worse for all of us. I didn't fight every rule, I said. I fought unfair enforcement. There's a difference. She walked away without responding. I thought that would be the end of it. The board had found merit in my harassment complaint. Patricia had been formally warned and required to recuse herself from anything involving my property, and life could go back to normal. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I came home from work to find a notice on my door. But this time it wasn't from the HOA. It was from the City of Boulder Code Enforcement Division. Someone had filed a complaint claiming my property had multiple code violations, inadequate drainage, possible foundation issues, and an unpermitted deck structure. I didn't have a deck. I didn't have drainage problems, and my foundation was fine. I'd had it inspected when I bought the house. The notice said an inspector would be coming out within 10 days to investigate the complaint. It included a case number and the name of the inspector assigned, a guy named Rafael Torres. I called the number on the notice the next morning. Code Enforcement, Torres speaking. Hi, this is Connor Radcliffe. I received a notice about a complaint filed against my property at 428 Pinewood Drive. Right, yeah. Let me pull that up. Okay, complaint was filed anonymously, citing possible drainage issues, foundation problems, and an unpermitted deck. I have you scheduled for an inspection next Thursday at 2 p.m. Does that work? I don't have a deck, and I don't have any of the other problems listed. This complaint is fake. Well, I still have to come out and verify that. If there are no violations, we'll close the case. Can you tell me anything about who filed the complaint? It was anonymous, like I said. We have an online portal where people can report potential code violations. Is there any way to track where the complaint came from? Not really. The system logs IP addresses, but we don't release that information unless there's a police investigation or something. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and tried to think. An anonymous complaint, filed right after the HOA board found merit in my harassment complaint against Patricia. It had to be her. But how could I prove it? Thursday afternoon, Inspector Torres showed up right on time. He was a Latino guy in his 30s, wearing a city polo shirt and carrying a clipboard and camera. Mr. Radcliffe, Rafael Torres, City Code Enforcement. Thanks for coming out. Like I said on the phone, I think this is a bogus complaint. Let's just take a look and see what we find. He walked around my property taking photos and notes. He looked at the foundation from several angles, checked the grading around the house, and examined the backyard. "Well, I don't see any deck," he said, "permitted or otherwise, and your drainage looks fine. Foundation looks solid too." Whoever filed this complaint either had the wrong address or was just making stuff up. "I think someone filed it to harass me. I'm in a dispute with my HOA president." He gave me a knowing look. "Yeah, we get that sometimes. HOA beef spills over into false code complaints. It's a waste of everyone's time. Is there anything I can do about it? If it keeps happening, you could file a police report for harassment. The police might be able to subpoena the IP records from our system, but for a one-time thing," he shrugged, "not much you can do. I'll close this case out as unfounded. You should get a letter in a few days confirming there were no violations." After he left, I thought about what he'd said. If it kept happening, I could go to the police. But Patricia was smart. She probably wouldn't file multiple fake complaints that would be too obvious. A week later, I got home to find my trash cans knocked over and garbage strewn across my front yard. Not just knocked over like wind might do, it completely dumped out, with trash spread systematically across the lawn. I checked my security cameras. At 2:17 a.m. the previous night, a figure in dark clothing and a ski mask had walked up my driveway, dumped out both trash cans, and then spent several minutes spreading the contents around my yard. The video wasn't clear enough to identify who it was, but the person was about 5'4" or 5'5", Patricia's height. I cleaned up the mess and saved the video footage. I also filed a police report for vandalism, though the officer who took the report told me that without a clear identification, there wasn't much they could do. "You have any idea who might have done this?" the officer asked. "I'm in a dispute with my HOA president. I filed a harassment complaint against her a few weeks ago." "HOA drama, huh? We see a lot of that. Keep the video footage. If anything else happens, let us know and we'll try to establish a pattern." 3 days later, someone slashed 2 of my car tires while it was parked in my driveway overnight. Again, the security footage showed a figure in dark clothing at 3:00 a.m., but the face was covered and the identification wasn't clear. I filed another police report. This time the same officer came out. "Mr. Radcliffe, right? Another incident, slashed tires this time. I have video again, but the person is wearing a mask." He reviewed the footage. "Similar height and build to your trash can incident. Could be the same person." "It's my HOA president." "It has to be." "Do you have any proof it's her? Anything concrete?" "No, but who else would be doing this?" "I understand your frustration, but I can't go question someone based on a hunch. If you can get actual evidence it's her, clear video of her face, witnesses, something like that, then we can pursue it. For now, I'll file this report, and you should consider installing more cameras with better angles." I took his advice. I bought 2 more high-resolution cameras and positioned them to cover my driveway and side yard from different angles. I also installed motion-activated lights all around the house. 2 weeks passed without incident. I started to think maybe Patricia had been scared off by the police reports, or maybe I'd been wrong and it hadn't been her at all. Then, on a Tuesday morning, I woke up to find that someone had spray-painted "Move Out" in large red letters across my garage door. And this time, my new cameras had done their job. The footage was crystal clear. At 2:43 a.m., a white Mercedes SUV with the license plate Hoken had pulled up in front of my house. Patricia Henderson got out, looked around, walked up to my garage with a can of spray paint, and spent about 5 minutes painting the message. Her face was clearly visible in multiple frames. I immediately called the police and sent the video file to my laptop so I could show them. 2 officers arrived within 30 minutes. I showed them the footage, and I could see their expressions change from routine investigation to actual interest. "That's pretty clear," one of them said. "You can identify her, Patricia Henderson. She's the president of our HOA. We've been in a dispute for months. And you filed prior reports about vandalism. 2 other incidents, yes. Trash cans dumped and tires slashed. I have video of those too, but the person was masked. Same build and height, though." They took the video files, got Patricia's address from me, and said they'd be in touch. About 2 hours later, I got a call from the officer. "Mr. Radcliffe, we went to Patricia Henderson's residence. We showed her the video footage, and she denied it was her. She claims someone must have stolen her license plate or the video is doctored. You can see her face clear as day. We know. We told her that. We asked if she'd be willing to come to the station to answer some questions, and she refused and said we'd need to talk to her lawyer. We're going to pursue criminal charges for vandalism and possibly criminal mischief. The district attorney's office will review the case. What happens now? We'll submit our report and the evidence to the DA. They'll decide whether to file charges. Given the clear video evidence, I'd say it's pretty likely. You'll probably get contacted by a victim advocate at some point. In the meantime, if she approaches your property again, call 911 immediately." Over the next few days, word spread through the neighborhood about what had happened. I don't know who leaked it, but suddenly everyone knew that Patricia had been caught on camera vandalizing my property and that the police were involved. The HOA board held an emergency meeting. I wasn't there, but Michelle called me afterward to fill me in. "The board voted unanimously to remove Patricia as president," she said. "Gordon is taking over as president for the rest of the term. We also voted to revoke her board membership entirely. This is a huge scandal, Connor. People are shocked." "Has she said anything?" "She submitted a resignation letter before the meeting, actually. I think her lawyer told her to step down. The letter just said she was resigning for personal reasons and thanked the community for the opportunity to serve. No mention of what actually happened. You think she'll be charged?" "I don't know. I hope so. What she did was way over the line." A week later, I received a letter from the Boulder County District Attorney's office. They were filing criminal charges against Patricia Henderson for criminal mischief and vandalism. There was also a second charge. It turned out that spray painting someone's property with threatening messages could be charged as a form of menacing under Colorado law. The letter included information about the court date and explained that I might be called to testify. I also received a notice that Patricia had filed a restraining order against me, claiming I was harassing and threatening her. That would have been laughable if it hadn't been so frustrating. I had to go to court to contest it. At the restraining order hearing, I brought all my documentation, the video evidence of her vandalizing my property, the police reports, the record of the HOA harassment complaint. Patricia showed up with a lawyer, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit. Her lawyer argued that I had waged a months-long campaign to destroy her reputation, that I had made false accusations about her dog, and that I had threatened her at HOA meetings. "That's completely false," I said when it was my turn. "I have video evidence that her dog urinated in my yard, which led to an unjustified fine. When I successfully appealed that fine, she explicitly threatened to target my property, which she did with multiple baseless fines over the following months. The HOA board found merit in my harassment complaint against her. Then someone started vandalizing my property, and I have clear video evidence showing it was Mrs. Henderson. The judge reviewed the video footage of the spray painting incident. "Mrs. Henderson, is that you in this video?" The judge asked, Her lawyer jumped in. "Your Honor, we dispute the authenticity of that video. It could have been altered or manipulated. It's from a consumer-grade security camera with time-stamped footage," the judge said dryly. "Do you have any actual evidence it was manipulated, or are you just speculating? We'd need time to have it examined by an expert. This is a restraining order hearing, counselor, not a criminal trial. Based on what I'm seeing, it appears Mrs. Henderson is the one who has been engaging in harassment and criminal behavior. The request for a restraining order is denied. Mr. Radcliffe, if you'd like to file for a restraining order against Mrs. Henderson, you'd have grounds to do so." I hadn't thought about that, but it made sense. "Yes, Your Honor, I would like to do that." The judge granted me a temporary restraining order on the spot, ordering Patricia to stay at least 100 yards away from me and my property. A full hearing would be scheduled for later, but the temporary order was effective immediately. As we left the courtroom, Patricia's lawyer tried to brush past me quickly, but Patricia herself gave me a look of pure hatred. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Madam, you need to leave," a bailiff said, stepping between us. "The restraining order is in effect immediately." The criminal case moved forward over the summer. I had to testify at a preliminary hearing, where I explained the whole history of the dispute and walked through the video evidence. The judge found probable cause and bound the case over for trial. Patricia's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, pleading guilty to a lesser charge of criminal mischief with a fine and probation, no jail time. But the DA's office wasn't interested in a deal. They wanted to go to trial, partly because the evidence was so strong, and partly because they wanted to send a message that this kind of behavior wouldn't be tolerated. The trial was scheduled for October. In the meantime, I finally had peace. Patricia wasn't at HOA meetings anymore. I didn't receive any more bogus fines. My property wasn't vandalized. The new HOA president, Gordon, was boring and reasonable, exactly what an HOA president should be. The trial lasted 3 days. Patricia's defense was essentially that she had been under extreme stress, that I had unfairly targeted her and ruined her reputation, and that she had snapped one night and made a terrible mistake. Her lawyer tried to paint her as a dedicated community volunteer who had devoted years to improving the neighborhood, only to be attacked by a vindictive homeowner. But the video evidence was damning. The jury saw clear footage of Patricia spray painting my garage. They heard testimony about the prior vandalism incidents, the harassment complaint, and the pattern of bogus fines. They heard from Inspector Torres about the false code enforcement complaint. After less than 4 hours of deliberation, the jury came back with guilty verdicts on all counts. At sentencing, the judge was blunt. "Mrs. Henderson, you held a position of authority in your community. Instead of using that authority responsibly, you abused it to harass a homeowner who had done nothing wrong except exercise his right to appeal an unjustified fine. When the HOA board sided with Mr. Radcliffe, you escalated your harassment into criminal behavior. You vandalized his property multiple times, causing him expense and emotional distress. You then compounded your offense by filing a frivolous restraining order against him in an attempt to continue your harassment through the court system." The judge sentenced Patricia to 60 days in county jail, 2 years of probation, restitution for the cost of repairing my garage and replacing my tires, and 200 hours of community service. She was also ordered to undergo anger management counseling. Patricia's face crumpled as the sentence was read. Her lawyer immediately filed notice of appeal, but the judge ordered her to report to the county jail within 7 days to begin serving her sentence. I felt a mix of emotions as I left the courthouse. Relief, mostly. Vindication. But also something like sadness. This had all started with yellow snow. If Patricia had just acknowledged that her dog had caused the problem, or if she'd been willing to work with me instead of threatening me, none of this would have happened. She'd thrown away her reputation, her position in the community, and her freedom over pride and petness. A few weeks after Patricia reported to jail, I received a letter from her lawyer. Patricia wanted to write me an apology letter as part of her anger management program, and her therapist thought it might help her rehabilitation. Would I be willing to receive it? I thought about it for a while and eventually said yes. The letter arrived about a week later. It was surprisingly honest. Patricia acknowledged that she had let her ego and need for control consume her. She admitted that the yellow snow fine had been petty, that she'd been embarrassed when I proved her dog had caused the problem, and that she'd handled the situation terribly from that point forward. She said she'd been so focused on being right and maintaining her authority that she'd lost sight of basic decency and fairness. She apologized for the harassment, the bogus fines, the vandalism, and the attempted restraining order. "I destroyed my own life," she wrote near the end. "Not you. I made choices that were cruel and illegal, and I'm facing the consequences of those choices. I'm truly sorry for everything I put you through. I hope you can eventually forgive me, though I know I don't deserve it." I read the letter twice and then put it in a folder with all the other documents from the whole saga. Did I forgive her? I wasn't sure. I appreciated the apology, and it seemed genuine, but she'd made my life hell for months. She'd vandalized my property and tried to drive me out of my home. That wasn't easy to forgive. Still, holding on to anger didn't seem productive. I wrote a short response saying I appreciated her apology and hoped she would get the help she needed. I didn't say I forgave her, but I didn't say I didn't either. Life in Meadowbrook Estates gradually returned to normal. Gordon turned out to be a competent HOA president who actually cared about being fair and reasonable. Michelle remained on the board, along with Bob and Susan. They filled Patricia's vacant seat with a younger guy named Andre who worked from home and mostly just wanted the neighborhood to be quiet and functional. The HOA meetings became boring again, which was perfect. They discussed practical things like when to trim the common area trees and whether to resurface the clubhouse parking lot. No drama, no petty enforcement actions, no power trips. My garage got repainted. Patricia's restitution payment covered it. The whole incident became a cautionary tale in the neighborhood about what happens when HOA power goes to someone's head. About 6 months after Patricia's sentencing, I ran into Denise from the HOA office at a coffee shop in Boulder. We'd never really talked outside of HOA business, but she recognized me and came over to say hi. "How are you doing?" she asked. "That whole situation with Patricia was crazy." "I'm good. Everything's been peaceful since Gordon took over. He's so much easier to work with." Patricia used to call me 3 or 4 times a day with complaints about residents and demands to issue fines. Gordon checks in maybe once a week and is always reasonable. Did you know what she was doing? The harassment and everything. Denise looked uncomfortable. "I suspected she was being unfair to you, yeah. But she was my boss, basically. The board hired the management company I work for, and Patricia was the main point of contact. I couldn't exactly confront her about abusing her authority. I'm not blaming you, I'm just curious. Between you and me. There were other residents she targeted over the years. Nobody as bad as what she did to you, but there were people who got multiple fines for minor stuff, always people who had disagreed with her or challenged her about something. You weren't the first, but you were the one who finally stood up to her and had evidence to back it up. That made me wonder how many other people had been harassed or driven out of the neighborhood by Patricia over the years, but I decided not to dwell on it. It was over now. By the following spring, almost a year after the whole thing had started with the yellow snow fine, I'd mostly moved on. I still lived in Meadowbrook Estates, and I had no plans to leave. My house was great, the neighborhood was nice, and the HOA was finally functional and reasonable. I even adopted a dog, a golden retriever puppy I named Rocky. He was adorable and friendly, and I made sure to always keep him on a leash during walks and clean up after him. I wasn't going to give anyone any reason to fine me for yellow snow. One Saturday morning in April, I was out walking Rocky around the neighborhood when I saw someone new moving into a house a few streets over from mine. A young couple, probably in their late 20s, were unloading boxes from a moving truck. I walked over with Rocky to say hi the way neighbors do. "Welcome to Meadowbrook Estates," I said. "I'm Connor. I live over on Pinewood Drive." The woman smiled. "Thanks. I'm Christina. This is my husband David. This is our first house. Congratulations. It's a nice neighborhood." "The HOA is pretty reasonable," David laughed. "That's good to hear. We were worried after we read some of the bylaws. They seemed pretty strict." "They are detailed," I said, "but the current board is fair. If you ever have questions or issues, Gordon's the president now, and he's good to work with." "We actually heard there was some drama with the previous HOA president," Christina said. "Yeah, that was a whole thing. She got a little power crazy and ended up catching criminal charges for vandalizing a resident's property. But that's all in the past now." They both looked shocked. "Wow, that's intense." It was, but like I said, the current board is much better. Just follow the rules, maintain your property reasonably, and you'll be fine. Oh, and if you have a dog, keep it on a leash. That's both an HOA rule and a county law. Rocky chose that moment to sit down and start chewing on his leash, making us all laugh. We chatted for a few more minutes, and I gave them my phone number in case they had any questions about the neighborhood. As I walked back home with Rocky, I felt good. I'd survived the HOA nightmare, helped establish better governance for the community, and now I could welcome new residents without them having to worry about getting harassed by a power-hungry board president. The whole experience had taught me a few things. First, documentation is everything. If I hadn't had those security cameras, I never would have been able to prove Patricia's harassment or her vandalism. Second, standing up to abuse of authority matters, even when it's uncomfortable. If I just paid that first yellow snow fine, Patricia would have continued to terrorize other residents unchecked. And third, most people are reasonable if you give them a chance. It was just Patricia's ego and need for control that had created the problem. That evening, I sat on my back deck with Rocky beside me, watching the sun set over the Colorado mountains. My garage was freshly painted. My property was well maintained. My relationship with the HOA was cordial and professional. And Patricia was somewhere far away from my life, hopefully learning from her mistakes. I raised my beer in a silent toast to boring, functional HOA governance, and Rocky wagged his tail in agreement. The following week, the HOA held its annual meeting where they presented the budget for the coming year and elected board members for the new term. Gordon ran for re-election as president and won unanimously. Michelle, Bob, and Susan all stayed on. Andre remained in the at-large seat. During the open comment period, an older resident named Frank stood up. "I just want to say, I've been living in Meadowbrook for 12 years, and this past year has been the smoothest I can remember. No drama, fair enforcement of the rules, and actual improvements to the community. Thank you to Gordon and the rest of the board." Several people applauded. Gordon looked pleased but humble. "We're just trying to do the job right," he said. "HOA boards exist to maintain property values and make the neighborhood pleasant for everyone. We're not here to make anyone's life difficult." I caught Michelle's eye across the room, and she gave me a small smile. We both knew that the positive change in the HOA's culture had come at a cost: months of harassment, police investigations, a criminal trial, but it had been worth it. After the meeting, Gordon pulled me aside. "Connor, I wanted to thank you. I know the situation with Patricia was rough on you, but your willingness to stand up and push back probably saved a lot of other people from similar treatment. I just didn't want to pay a bogus fine." "It was more than that. You documented everything, you followed the process, and you didn't back down when she escalated. That took guts. A lot of people would have just paid the fines and kept their heads down. Or moved out of the neighborhood, which is probably what she wanted." "Exactly. Anyway, I wanted you to know your efforts are appreciated." We shook hands, and I headed home feeling validated. Over the next few months, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Patricia had completed her jail sentence and was living with her sister in Denver. She'd sold her house in Meadowbrook Estates, apparently unable to face the neighbors after everything that had happened. Princess, the Pomeranian, had gone to live with her daughter in Fort Collins. I felt a twinge of something, not quite sympathy, but awareness that her life had been completely upended by her own choices. She'd lost her home, her position in the community, her reputation, and her freedom, all because she couldn't handle the minor embarrassment of being wrong about a yellow snow fine. But mostly, I just felt relieved that she was gone and wouldn't be returning. Rocky grew into a great dog, friendly, well-behaved, and beloved by everyone in the neighborhood. Kids would stop to pet him on our walks, and other dog owners would pause to chat. I became known as Rocky's owner to some of the neighbors, which was fine by me. One day in early summer, I was in my front yard planting some new flowers with proper architectural review committee approval this time, though Gordon had just laughed when I submitted the form and said, "Connor, they're flowers. We're not going to make this difficult." A car pulled up and a woman I didn't recognize got out. She was probably in her 40s, dressed professionally and carrying a folder. "Excuse me, are you Connor Radcliffe?" "That's me." "I'm Jennifer Walsh. I'm a reporter with the Boulder Daily Camera. I'm working on an article about HOA disputes and their resolution, and your case with Patricia Henderson came up in my research. Would you be willing to talk to me about what happened?" I hesitated. The whole thing was over and settled. Did I really want to rehash it all for a newspaper article? "What's the angle of the article?" I asked. "I'm looking at how HOA governance can go wrong and what mechanisms exist to fix it. Your case is interesting because you used the internal processes, first appealing fines, filing a harassment complaint with the board, and when that didn't stop the harassment, you had evidence that led to criminal prosecution. It's kind of a textbook example of how residents can protect themselves from HOA abuse." When she put it that way, it seemed like it might actually be helpful to other people dealing with similar situations. "Okay, I'll talk to you. But I want to be clear that the current HOA board is great, and I don't want this article to make it seem like Meadowbrook Estates has ongoing problems." "Absolutely. That's actually part of the story, how the community recovered from having a problematic board president." We sat on my porch, and I walked her through the whole saga. She took notes and asked thoughtful questions. She'd already reviewed the court records and spoken to some of the other board members, so she had the basic facts. She mostly wanted to hear about the experience from my perspective. "What would you say to other homeowners who are dealing with HOA harassment?" she asked near the end of our conversation. "Document everything. Get security cameras. Save every email, every letter, every fine notice. Follow the official appeals processes and show up to board meetings. And if it escalates beyond just fines and becomes actual harassment or vandalism, don't hesitate to involve the police. HOA boards have authority over certain things, but they're not above the law. You think criminal prosecution was the right outcome in Patricia's case? I think it was the inevitable outcome. She committed crimes, clear, documented crimes. She spray-painted my garage and slashed my tires. That's not an HOA issue, that's criminal behavior. The article came out a few weeks later with the headline, "When HOA Power Goes Too Far." How one Boulder neighborhood addressed board president abuse. It was fair and well-written, presenting the facts without sensationalizing them. Jennifer had interviewed Gordon and Michelle too, and they both emphasized how the board had taken the harassment complaint seriously and ultimately removed Patricia. The article ended with a quote from a law professor at CU Boulder who specialized in property law. HOA disputes are common, but they rarely escalate to criminal behavior. The Meadowbrook case is a reminder that board members must remember they are volunteers managing shared property, not dictators with unlimited authority. When that line gets crossed, there are consequences. A few people in the neighborhood mentioned the article to me, but it didn't create any big drama. If anything, it made people more aware of their rights and more appreciative of the current board's reasonable approach. By the following winter, almost 2 years after the original yellow snow incident, it had become something of a neighborhood legend. New residents would hear the story and ask if it was really true. Kids in the neighborhood joked about yellow snow fines. And every time it snowed, at least one neighbor would text me a photo of their pristine white yard with a caption like, "No HOA violations here." I'd repainted my garage myself after the insurance and restitution had covered the initial fix, choosing a slightly different shade of approved beige just because I felt like it. I'd submitted the paint color for approval, and Gordon had signed off on it within a day. Rocky was now fully grown, a beautiful golden retriever who remained obsessed with chasing tennis balls and greeting every person and dog he met. On our morning walks, we'd pass the spot where the infamous yellow snow had been, and I'd think about how something so small and stupid had snowballed into months of harassment and ultimately criminal charges. One morning in late January, I was walking Rocky when I saw a small white dog off-leash ahead of us on the sidewalk. For a split second, my heart jumped, thinking it might be Princess and Patricia might be back. But then I saw it was a different breed entirely, a Maltese, and its owner was a young man I recognized from a few streets over. "Sorry," he called out as he caught up with his dog. She got out the door before I could leash her. "No problem," I said, and I meant it. It was just a dog doing dog things. No big deal. Rocky sniffed the Maltese, tails wagged, and we all continued on our ways. Later that day, I got an email from the HOA. For a moment, I tensed, old reflexes kicking in. But it was just the monthly newsletter information about the spring landscaping schedule for common areas, a reminder that pool passes would go on sale next month, and a notice that the annual community garage sale would be in May. Normal, boring HOA stuff. Exactly as it should be. I marked the garage sale date on my calendar and deleted the email. That evening, I was working from home when my doorbell rang. I checked the camera. It was Christina and David, the couple who'd moved in last spring. I opened the door. "Hey guys, what's up?" Christina held a plate covered in foil. "We made too many cookies and thought you might want some. Chocolate chip." "I always want chocolate chip cookies. Come on in." They came in, and Rocky immediately tried to befriend them with his usual enthusiasm. We sat in my living room, and they filled me in on their first year in the neighborhood. "We love it here," David said. "The HOA has been totally fine. We had to get approval to plant some bushes, but they approved it right away. And everyone's been so friendly," Christina added. "Nothing like the horror stories you hear about HOA neighborhoods." "It's a good community," I agreed. "It just took some work to get the governance right." As they left, Christina paused at the door. "We heard about what happened with you and the previous HOA president. That must have been awful." "It was definitely stressful, but it worked out in the end." "Well, we're glad you stayed. You were one of the first neighbors to welcome us, and that meant a lot." After they left, I ate 3 of the cookies and gave Rocky a dog treat since he'd been eyeing the cookies with intense interest. I thought about how the neighborhood had changed in 2 years. Not in terms of the houses or the streets, but in the feeling of the place. There was less tension, less fear of arbitrary enforcement actions, more sense of actual community. All because I'd refused to pay a fine for yellow snow. The next HOA meeting was in February, and the main topic was whether to increase the annual dues by $20 per household to cover rising landscaping costs. It was a boring, practical discussion. People asked reasonable questions about the budget. The board provided clear answers. They took a vote and the increase passed. No one yelled. No one made accusations. No one stormed out. It was possibly the most boring meeting I'd ever attended, and it was perfect. As I walked out to my car afterward, Gordon caught up with me. "Connor, I'm going to be stepping down as president next year. I'm planning to do some traveling with my wife, and I won't have time for board responsibilities. Would you consider running for a board position?" I actually laughed. "After everything I went through with the HOA. "You want me on the board?" "Exactly because of what you went through. You understand the importance of fair governance and accountability. You'd be good at it." "Let me think about it." "Sure. Elections are in December. Just let me know." I drove home thinking about his offer. A year ago, I would have immediately said no. The HOA had been a source of stress and conflict in my life. But now, with Patricia gone and a functional board in place, maybe being on the board would be a way to help make sure things stayed fair and reasonable. I hadn't decided yet, but I didn't rule it out. Spring arrived in Boulder with its usual dramatic shift from winter to warmth. The trees in the neighborhood budded and bloomed. People started working in their yards again. The neighborhood kids were out playing in the streets after school. Rocky loved the warmer weather and longer walks. And in my front yard, near the mailbox, the tulips that had caused so much trouble came up again. They bloomed bright red and yellow, cheerful and oblivious to the drama they'd been part of. I took a photo of them and texted it to Michelle with the caption, "Look, unauthorized flowers." She responded with laughing emojis and, "Don't worry, I won't fine you." One Saturday in April, I was washing my car in the driveway when a woman I didn't know walked up. She was probably in her 60s, nicely dressed with a friendly smile. "Excuse me, are you Connor Radcliffe?" "I am." "I'm Barbara Chen, Susan's mother. Susan is on your HOA board." "Oh sure, Susan's great. She told me about what happened with the previous board president." "I wanted to thank you." "Thank me. My daughter loves this neighborhood, but she used to come home from board meetings stressed and upset. Patricia would bully anyone who disagreed with her, and Susan seriously considered resigning from the board. But after you stood up to Patricia and the board finally dealt with her, everything changed. Susan actually enjoys the board work now, so thank you for not backing down." I was touched. "I appreciate you telling me that. I didn't realize Patricia was making life difficult for the board members too." "Oh yes. She ran those meetings like a dictator, But you helped change that. After she left, I thought about all the ripple effects of the whole situation. It wasn't just about me avoiding unfair fines. Patricia's behavior had been affecting the board members, probably other residents who'd been afraid to speak up, and the whole culture of the neighborhood. By standing up to her, I'd helped shift things in a positive direction for everyone. That felt good. In June, I got a formal letter from the court system. Patricia's appeal had been denied. Her conviction and sentence would stand. The letter was just a notification, closing out my involvement in the case. I filed it away with all the other documents and didn't think much about it. That chapter was truly closed now. Rocky and I established new routines. Morning walks before I started work, usually around 7. Evening walks after dinner, around 6:30. Weekend adventures to the trails in the foothills around Boulder, where he could run and swim in the creeks. I dated a woman named Emma for a few months. She thought the whole HOA saga was hilarious and started calling me the Yellow Snow Avenger. It didn't work out with Emma for unrelated reasons, but we stayed friendly. In the fall, Gordon formally announced he'd be stepping down as HOA president at the end of the year. Michelle said she'd be interested in the position. Bob said he'd run for vice president if Michelle became president, and I decided to run for the at-large seat that Andre was vacating. I figured if I was on the board, I could help make sure the HOA stayed focused on actual community needs and didn't slide back into petty enforcement of minor violations. Plus, I'd learned a lot about the bylaws and governance processes over the past 2 years. Might as well put that knowledge to use. The election was in December, and it was completely drama-free. Michelle was elected president, Bob became vice president, and I won the at-large seat. Susan and Gordon stayed on in their existing roles, though Gordon said he'd probably step down the following year. My first board meeting as a member was in January, exactly 2 years after the yellow snow incident that had started everything. We discussed maintenance of the common areas, reviewed the budget, and approved a request from a resident to install a solar panel system. It took 45 minutes and everyone was cordial and efficient. "Congrats on your first meeting," Michelle said afterward. "How'd it feel?" "Boring." "In the best possible way," she laughed. "That's exactly what we're going for." 2 years had passed since that February morning when I'd found an orange fine notice on my door for yellow snow in my yard. 2 years since Patricia had threatened me and started her campaign of harassment. 2 years since I discovered her dog had caused the problem she was fining me for. In that time, I documented everything, appealed multiple bogus fines, filed a harassment complaint, caught vandalism on camera, participated in a criminal trial, gotten a restraining order, and helped change the culture of an HOA board. I'd gone from frustrated homeowner to board member, from harassed resident to neighborhood example of standing up for what's right. All because I refused to pay for yellow snow caused by someone else's dog. Walking through the neighborhood now, with Rocky beside me and friendly neighbors waving hello, I felt at home in a way I hadn't before all the drama. The neighborhood wasn't just a place I lived, it was a community I'd fought for and helped improve. And that made all the stress and conflict worth it. On a bright February morning, almost exactly 2 years to the day after the original incident, I walked Rocky past my mailbox. The ground was covered in fresh snow from an overnight storm, pristine and white. Rocky sniffed around the mailbox post, and I gently tugged his leash to move him along before he could think about peeing there. "Come on, buddy. Let's keep that snow white. I've had enough yellow snow drama to last a lifetime." Rocky wagged his tail and trotted along beside me, and we continued our walk through the peaceful, well-maintained, reasonably governed neighborhood of Meadowbrook Estates. Life was good. The HOA was functional, and there wasn't a single orange fine notice in sight.